The Amazon rainforest hides one of history's greatest deceptions. For centuries we believed it was a pristine wilderness, a timeless monument to pure nature untouched by human hands. That story is wrong. Recent discoveries are revealing the Amazon was once a carefully managed garden, a sprawling landscape engineered by a sophisticated lost civilization. By the end of this video, you will see the world's greatest jungle not as a wild place, but as the monumental achievement of forgotten architects. We will uncover how they shaped the very soil and trees, and why their entire world vanished from memory. What does it mean for our future if the greatest natural wonder we know was actually built by human hands? This belief in a pristine wilderness was not just a story, it was a scientific doctrine. For generations, experts described the Amazon as a green desert. The term itself sounds like a contradiction, but it captured their core idea. The jungle was seen as a place of staggering beauty and immense biodiversity, yet paradoxically, a place where human civilization could never take root. The soil was thought to be too poor, too thin, too quickly drained of nutrients by the relentless rains and rampant growth. It was a landscape that demanded constant movement, they argued, forcing any human inhabitants into a life of small, nomadic bands, forever hunting and gathering, never settling down to build. This view was shaped by the accounts of early European explorers, who ventured into the overwhelming density and saw only chaos, not order. Even well into the 20th century, many anthropologists carried this assumption into the field. They documented the lives of contemporary indigenous groups, often interpreting their ways of life as timeless relics of a simpler human past, perfectly adapted to, but never altering their untamable home. This pristine myth became more than a theory. It became the lens through which the entire Amazon was understood. It told us that complex societies, with their agriculture, their monuments, and their large populations, were products of other kinds of landscapes, river valleys, and temperate coasts. The Amazon was nature's last great stronghold, a monument to wildness where humanity was merely a guest. But what if every assumption in that story was backwards? The journey to uncover the truth does not begin with lost temples or crumbled palaces. It starts with something far more humble and far more telling: the dirt beneath our feet. The first crack in the pristine myth appeared not in a temple, but in a garden. For decades, farmers and researchers across the Amazon kept noticing something strange. Amidst the vast stretches of thin, reddish, exhausted soil, there were pockets of earth so dark and rich they seemed to belong to another continent entirely. The locals had a name for it: Terra, Indian black earth. To the untrained eye, it might just look like good dirt. But to a scientist, it is an anomaly, a fossilized clue baked into the landscape itself. This is not natural forest soil. It is an artifact as deliberately crafted as a clay pot or a stone tool. When analyzed, Terra reveals its recipe: a sophisticated ancient blend of charcoal from controlled burns, fragments of pottery, composted plant waste, and even fish bones and animal remains. This was not a lucky accident. It was a technology, a form of ancient biochar engineering. The charcoal acts like a sponge, locking nutrients and moisture into the ground, preventing the relentless rains from washing everything away. The result is a self-reinforcing fertility that can last for a garden plot that refuses to fade back into the jungle. The sheer presence of this engineered soil changes the entire story. You do not create a permanent, nutrient-rich foundation for farming if you are a nomadic hunter-gatherer just passing through. You create it when you are putting down roots, literally and figuratively. You create it when you plan not just for the next season, but for generations to come. These dark earth islands are the fingerprints of a settled, agricultural society, one that possessed a deep, intimate understanding of how to work with the forest's ecology, not just survive within it. They weren't simply living in the Amazon, they were investing in it, building a foundation for something much larger. And if they were capable of engineering the very ground beneath them, what else were they building upon it? The engineered soil was just the beginning, a foundation waiting for a structure. For centuries, the the true scale of that structure remained invisible, hidden under a living roof of green so dense it exploration. From the ground, the Amazon presents itself as the very definition of chaos, an endless, overwhelming tangle where every square inch seems claimed by roots, vines, and leaves. But perspective changes everything. When researchers began to look not with their eyes, but with lasers from above, the chaos resolved into breathtaking, impossible order. Using a technology called Lidar, which can map the ground by piercing the forest canopy with millions of laser pulses, scientists have peeled back the green veil to reveal a lost world etched into the earth itself. What they found were not just random mounds or old riverbanks, but vast geometric earthworks of stunning precision. Across thousands of square miles, the land is inscribed with perfect circles, precise squares, and complex octagons, formed by deep ditches and high embankments. These are not natural formations. They are the footprints of monumental architecture, the ghostly outlines of ceremonial centers, fortified villages, and public plazas built not from stone, but sculpted from the living earth. Some of these are colossal, spanning distances greater than several football fields laid end to end. They are often connected by long, straight raised causeways that cut through the forest like ancient highways, linking community to community across the landscape. The sheer scale of these projects speaks volumes. To move that much earth, to organize the labor required for such precise and massive construction, points to a society with a high degree of social organization, shared purpose, and technical knowledge. This was not the work of scattered, simple tribes. This was the work of landscape architects thinking on a continental scale. The geometry itself is a clue to their worldview. Many of the earthworks align with celestial events like solstices, suggesting a sophisticated understanding of astronomy was woven into the very layout of their world. These shapes in the soil transform our image of Amazonian societies completely. They were not merely forest dwellers adapting to their environment. They were masterful engineers actively, deliberately, and beautifully reshaping it. They turned the jungle into a garden, and then into a geometric canvas. If the black earth was their agricultural technology, these earthworks were their civic and spiritual technology. But a civilization that builds on this scale must be fed, and a garden, no matter how fertile, has its limits. Or does it? The geometric earthworks revealed a civilization capable of organizing space, but the true genius of these people is written in the living forest itself. Walk through certain parts of the Amazon today, and you are not wandering through a random wilderness. You are strolling through the aisles of an ancient, abandoned supermarket. The canopy above you tells a story of deliberate choice. Researchers have mapped vast stretches where the tree diversity is strangely skewed, dominated by species that just happen to be incredibly valuable to humans. Towering Brazil nut trees, whose hard-shelled fruits are a nutritional powerhouse, stand in clusters that natural processes would never create. Patches of cacao trees, the source of chocolate, form groves far from their original wild range. The ubiquitous palm and the rubber tree, sources of food and material, appear in concentrations that defy the odds. This is not a coincidence of nature. It is the signature of a sophisticated, long-term forestry practice. Scientists call these anthropogenic forests, meaning human-created woodlands. For generations, perhaps, the people here practiced a form of agriculture that did not involve clearing the land and planting rows of a single crop. Instead, they worked within the existing ecosystem, selectively encouraging the growth of the most useful trees. They would clear small understory plants to give saplings light, protect young trees, and likely transplant or spread the seeds of their favorite species near their settlements and along their travel routes. Over centuries, this careful, sustained management altered the very genetic makeup of the forest, tilting the botanical odds in favor of species that served human needs. The result is a food forest, a self-sustaining orchard that continued to produce bounty long after its original caretakers were gone. This reveals a philosophy of living with the land that is profoundly different from the slash-and-burn image we once held. They were not conquerors of the jungle, they were its master gardeners, cultivating a partnership with nature so successful that their handiwork still feeds and sustains life thousands of years later. The forest we once called pristine is, in many places, their enduring legacy, a living monument to a sustainable way of life. But if they built such a stable, productive world, what could possibly have happened to make it all disappear? Millions of people once called this engineered garden home. That number is not a guess. It is a conclusion slowly built from the ground up. Each dark earth patch represents a potential village or town. Each geometric earthwork signifies a ceremonial or civic center of some importance. And those food forests, they are not the backyard gardens of a few families. They are the agricultural infrastructure for sustaining large, settled populations. When you map all these features across the western and southern Amazon, a new picture emerges, one that shatters old population estimates completely. For decades, scholars thought perhaps tens of thousands lived scattered across the entire basin. The latest research suggests a figure 100 times larger, possibly 8 to 10 million people or more living in the Amazon before European contact. That is a population comparable to many of the world's great civilizations of the same era. This changes everything we thought we knew about the Americas before 1492. The Amazon was not a sparsely populated wilderness separating the Andes from the Atlantic. It was a densely inhabited heartland, a thriving network of human life. The scale of their settlement was matched by the sophistication of their connections. This was not a single, monolithic empire with a central ruler, like the Inca to the west. Instead, imagine a vast and vibrant mosaic. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of distinct communities, each with their own identity and traditions, were linked together by the great liquid highways of the Amazon River and its countless tributaries. They were also connected by those straight, raised causeways that Lidar revealed cutting through the forest. These were not just local paths, they were regional roads. Along these routes, people, ideas, goods, and seeds would have traveled. A useful tree species nurtured in one community's forest garden could spread to another over generations. The knowledge of how to create Terra, that miraculous black soil, would have been a technology worth sharing. This interconnected web allowed for the exchange of the very practices that defined their civilization, a shared toolkit for living well in the jungle. They were united not under one flag, but by a common philosophy of landscape management, a collective project to cultivate a better world. That collective project achieved something almost beyond comprehension. The engineering of the Amazon was not a series of small, isolated gardens. It was a conscious, sustained, continent-wide ecological transformation. From the foothills of the Andes to the mouth of the river, across an area spanning millions of square kilometers, generation after generation made choices that subtly but permanently altered their environment. They favored certain trees. They enriched specific soils. They sculpted the earth into meaningful shapes. When you repeat these actions over centuries, the impact compounds. The Amazon we know today, with its stunning biodiversity, is in many ways a reflection of their ancient preferences. The forest itself is a living archive of their daily lives, their diets, their needs, and their vision for the land. They did not just live in the ecosystem, they became a keystone species within it, actively directing its growth and composition. This means the greatest symbol of untamed nature on our planet is, in a very real sense, a cultural artifact. It is a monument to a forgotten way of life, one that achieved a profound balance between human society and the natural world for thousands of years, which makes the silence that followed all the more haunting. A civilization of millions who reshaped a continent does not simply fade away without a cause. What force could possibly bring such a thriving, interconnected world to an end? Their technology was as elegant as it was effective. To understand how they transformed the jungle, we need to look at their primary tool, the creation of biochar, the very charcoal that gives Terra its rich, dark color. This was not the ash from a wild, destructive fire. It was the product of a deliberate and controlled process called pyrolysis. They would slowly burn organic waste, things like crop residues, nutshells, and wood, in pits or mounds with limited oxygen. This careful, smoldering burn created a porous, stable form of carbon, a kind of permanent sponge. When mixed into the thin Amazonian soil, this biochar performed miracles. Its countless tiny pores trap nutrients and moisture, preventing them from being washed away by the relentless tropical rains. It also becomes a welcoming home for beneficial soil microbes, creating a thriving underground ecosystem that sustains plant growth. The genius of this material is its longevity. Unlike modern fertilizers that wash out in a season, this engineered charcoal remains active in the ground for centuries, even. It was a one-time investment with perpetual returns, the foundation of permanent, fertile farmland in a place where it should not have been possible. But their toolkit extended far beyond the soil itself. They were master practitioners of agroforestry, a system that seems cutting-edge today. They did not simply plant rows of a single crop in an open field. Instead, they designed layered, synergistic gardens that mimicked the forest's own structure. Tall, fruit-bearing trees like palms and Brazil nuts formed the canopy. Beneath them, they might grow shade-tolerant crops, while vines and medicinal plants covered the ground. This created a resilient, multi-story food production system that was less vulnerable to pests, enriched the soil, and provided a diverse, year-round harvest. They also managed the waterways with remarkable skill. Archaeologists find evidence of complex fish weirs and ponds, showing they actively farmed aquatic resources, creating a sustainable protein source right in their backyards. Even their use of fire was sophisticated and deliberate. They likely used small, controlled burns not to raise the forest, but as a precise gardening tool. These low-intensity fires would clear dense underbrush, recycle nutrients locked in dead plants back into the soil, and encourage the growth of fire-resistant, useful species. It was a way of pruning and tending the landscape on a grand scale. When you combine these practices, you see a complete, integrated system. The biochar enriched the soil, the agroforestry systems produced abundant food and materials, the managed waterways provided protein, and the controlled burns maintained the health of their cultivated forests. This was not a collection of random survival tricks. It was a coherent, sustainable form of environmental engineering, a philosophy of partnership with the land that modern science is only now beginning to fully appreciate and learn from. They worked with the ecology of the Amazon, not against it, and in doing so, they built a civilization that flourished for thousands of years. This deep, symbiotic relationship makes their sudden disappearance from the historical record even more puzzling. How could a society so finely tuned to its environment, so resilient and established, simply vanish? The answer lies not in a failure of their technology, but in the arrival of something their carefully balanced world was utterly unprepared for. Their engineering was never just about survival. The vast scale and precision of their work points to a deeper purpose, a desire to build a world rich with meaning. Those massive geometric earthworks, for example, were far more than simple fortifications or property lines. Their perfect circles and aligned avenues suggest they served as ceremonial centers, places where the community would gather not just to live, but to connect. Many of these structures align with the solstice sun or other celestial events, turning the landscape itself into a giant astronomical calendar. Imagine standing in the center of one of these great earthwork circles as the dawn of the winter solstice breaks perfectly over a specific embankment. In that moment, the boundary between heaven and earth, between the community and the cosmos, would have felt beautifully thin. These were spaces designed for ritual, for marking time, for reinforcing a shared identity and a spiritual understanding of their place in the universe. The engineering created a stage for their culture to flourish. The bounty of their managed environment fueled this cultural complexity. The enriched Terra soils and the abundant food forests provided a reliable surplus. This is a crucial shift. When a society no longer needs every single member to focus solely on finding the next meal, it creates space for specialization. That surplus could support artisans who perfected the intricate pottery we find in the Black Earth sites. It could support healers and shamans who developed a profound knowledge of the forest's medicinal plants, a living pharmacy they had carefully cultivated for generations. It could support leaders and planners who coordinated the construction of those monumental earthworks and managed the trade networks along the rivers. Engineering the jungle created stability, and from that stability grew art, spirituality, governance, and innovation. Ultimately, this was not about conquering a wild place. It was about cultivating a home. They were not fighting against the jungle. They were engaging in a profound, reciprocal relationship with it. By favoring certain trees and enriching the soil, they were having a conversation with the land, one that lasted for centuries. Their engineering was an act of care, a way of weaving human needs into the ecological fabric without tearing it apart. The resulting landscape was a cultivated, meaningful one. It provided physical nourishment from its gardens, spiritual nourishment from its ceremonial spaces, and cultural nourishment from the community life it sustained. They transformed the Amazon from a wilderness into a homeland, a testament to the idea that human civilization does not have to be separate from nature, but can be a thoughtful, sustaining part of it. This deep, symbiotic success makes the catastrophe that followed even more tragic, for it came from a direction their engineering could not possibly have anticipated. The forest was their library, and every tree, vine, and root held a page. This staggering engineering project we have been tracing was not powered by machinery, but by memory. It was built upon a vast, living knowledge system, an intimate understanding of the natural world so deep it makes our modern expertise seem narrow by comparison. Ancient Amazonians did not just know the forest, they knew it in conversation. They understood thousands of plant species not as a list, but as a network of relationships. They knew which tree thrived in the shade of another, which vine could cure a fever, which root could be processed into a toxin for fishing, and which blossom would attract the pollinators their fruit trees needed. This was ethnobotanical knowledge of the highest order, a science woven into stories, rituals, and daily practice. A single elder might have carried in their mind a catalog of uses for hundreds of species, understanding growth cycles, soil preferences, and symbiotic partnerships that would take a modern botanist a lifetime to document. This knowledge was not static. It was a living library, meticulously passed down through generations. A child learning to identify a seedling was not just learning a name, they were learning a future resource, a piece of a puzzle that sustained their entire world. This is why their engineering felt so seamless. Their land management decisions were not guesses or acts of domination. They were informed choices, a nuanced reading of the forest's own rhythms. They knew that a controlled burn here would encourage new growth of a useful palm species next season. They understood that planting certain trees near their homes would improve the soil for their gardens. They recognized that by attracting certain animals with fruit trees, they could also manage insect populations. Every action was part of a complex, long-term dialogue with their environment. This points to a foundational philosophy, a deep-seated ethos of stewardship that stands in stark contrast to the conqueror mindset we often associate with civilization building. They did not see themselves as separate from the ecosystem, as masters over a wild realm to be tamed. Instead, they viewed humans as active, responsible participants within a living community. Their role was not to take, but to tend. Not to deplete, but to enhance. The proof is in the results. Their practices actively increased the fertility of the soil and amplified the biodiversity of the forest around them. They managed the land with the understanding that its vitality was their own vitality, that the well-being of the ecosystem directly translated to the well-being of their children and their children's children. In this light, the engineered Amazon emerges not as a human triumph over nature, but as a profound human partnership with it. This cultural system holds a quiet, urgent lesson for our own time. We face environmental crises born largely from seeing the natural world as a warehouse of resources to be extracted. They saw it as a garden to be cultivated, a reciprocal relationship where care yielded abundance for all life. Their legacy, written in the black earth and the food forests, challenges a core modern assumption. It asks us if true sustainability might not be about leaving nature alone, but about learning how to participate in it wisely, generously, and with a memory long enough to think in centuries, not just quarters. This brilliant, sustainable world was thriving right up until the moment it faced a threat no amount of ecological wisdom could engineer a defense against. The silence that fell over the Amazon was not the result of an ecological mistake. It was the echo of a distant accident. The end of this engineered world began not in the jungle, but on a ship. When the first European explorers began navigating the Great River in the 1500s, they carried with them an invisible cargo far more destructive than any weapon. They brought viruses. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, common in the Old World for centuries, were completely new to the Americas. The immune systems of the Amazon's millions of inhabitants had never encountered these pathogens. They had no defense. What followed was not a war, but a biological catastrophe. Historians and epidemiologists now believe that within a few generations of contact, up to 90% of the population was lost to successive waves of illness. The scale is almost impossible to grasp. Imagine a bustling network of communities, a chorus of 10 million voices, being reduced to a whisper of 1 million in the span of a century. The loss was not just of life, but of everything that life sustained. The gardeners vanished. With them went the collective memory, the daily practices of tending, pruning, and cultivating that had maintained the landscape for thousands of years. The great causeways, with no one to walk them or clear their paths, slowly filled with silt and seedlings. The precise geometric earthworks were gradually buried under centuries of leaf litter and root growth, their shapes softening until they became invisible from the ground. The food forests did not die, they simply went feral. The Brazil nut groves, the cacao stands, the fruit tree orchards continued to grow and reproduce, but without selective human encouragement, they slowly began to blend back into the surrounding wilderness. The engineered Amazon did not collapse in a fiery cataclysm. It was not conquered, it was abandoned. The most sophisticated and sustainable civilization the rainforest had ever known was undone by germs its people had never even seen. This left the land in a strange and poignant state. The infrastructure was all still there, the enriched soils, the useful trees, the monumental earthworks, but the intelligence required to actively manage it was gone. The forest, in its relentless vitality, began a long, slow process of reclamation, weaving a green veil over the works of its former partners. Within a few generations, the knowledge of what had been built there faded from living memory. For the survivors, the earthworks became the work of ancestral spirits or mythical beings. For the Europeans who came later, the jungle presented itself as an empty, primeval wilderness, perfectly fitting their myth of a pristine natural world. The greatest achievement of this lost civilization became its own camouflage, hiding in plain sight for over 400 years. Their legacy became a ghost in the machine of the forest, waiting for a technology like Lidar to see through the canopy and for a science willing to question the old stories. This raises a haunting and inevitable question. If the gardeners had never left, what would their world look like today? The story of this lost civilization's return is a modern detective story. For decades, even the most determined archaeologists faced an almost impossible barrier: the forest itself. The sheer density of the canopy made ground surveys painstakingly slow, like trying to read a map while holding it behind a thick green curtain. A researcher could stand mere feet from a massive earthwork and see nothing but trees and vines. But an even greater obstacle was the idea in their own minds, the deeply ingrained pristine myth. This belief that the Amazon was an untouched wilderness created a powerful bias. It told generations of explorers exactly what they should and should not expect to find. They were not looking for cities or farms, so they did not see them. They interpreted the dark earth patches as natural oddities or old river deposits. They saw the clusters of useful trees as happy accidents of nature. The evidence was there, but the narrative refused to let it come into focus. The turning point required two things: a new way of seeing and a new way of thinking. The first came from the sky. The advent of satellite imagery provided a broader view, hinting at large-scale patterns in the landscape. But the true revolution was Lidar. Mounted on aircraft, this technology fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. Most bounce off the leaves and branches, but a fraction penetrate tiny gaps, hit the earth, and return. By filtering out the returns from the vegetation, computers can construct a breathtakingly detailed, three-dimensional map of the bare ground below. It is like giving the forest an X-ray. Suddenly, the perfect circles, the precise squares, the long causeways, all hidden for centuries, were revealed in crisp, undeniable detail. It was as if someone had pulled back a colossal rug to reveal a masterpiece etched into the floor. This technological triumph, however, needed a parallel shift in scientific perspective. Around the same time, a growing number of researchers, often in collaboration with indigenous communities, began to fundamentally question the old story. They started to see the landscape not as a passive backdrop for human history, but as an active archive of it. They began to ask different questions. Instead of asking why no civilization existed here, they asked what a civilization adapted to this place would look like. The answer was not stone pyramids, but living forests and enriched soils. The rediscovery of this lost world is therefore a dual revelation. It is the stunning recovery of ancient wonders from the earth, yes. But it is also a humbling lesson about perception. It shows how our own stories about the past can blind us to the truth, and how letting go of an old myth can open our eyes to a reality far more complex and inspiring. This revelation does not diminish the Amazon's grandeur, it deepens it, layering human ingenuity and resilience onto its natural majesty. Yet, with this new map of the past now in our hands, we are faced with a pressing and urgent question. What does this ancient knowledge mean for our own future in a changing world? The Amazon's lost civilization is more than a local mystery. It is a challenge to the global story of human history. For over a century, archaeology has been guided by a map, one that placed the great cradles of civilization in specific, predictable locations. Think of the fertile floodplains of Mesopotamia, the predictable Nile, the river valleys of the Indus, and the Yellow River. These were landscapes of abundance, where surplus grain could be easily grown and stored, fueling the rise of cities, bureaucracies, and empires. Tropical rainforests like the Amazon were conspicuously absent from this map. They were placed in the category of impossible places, environments too demanding, too chaotic, and too poor in resources to ever support a complex society. The Amazonian discoveries have effectively redrawn that map. They prove beyond any doubt that human ingenuity is not limited by biome. A sophisticated civilization can indeed arise and flourish in the heart of a rainforest, not by conquering it with brute force, but by understanding it with profound intimacy. This single realization forces a global rethink. If we were so completely wrong about the Amazon, what other impossible places might hold similar secrets? Could the dense jungles of Central Africa or Southeast Asia also conceal the footprints of societies we have yet to recognize? The Amazonian model suggests we may have systematically underestimated human adaptability, searching only for civilizations that looked like our own traditional models in the landscapes we assumed were correct. This civilization also demands we expand our very definition of what a complex society looks like. For generations, archaeologists have used a specific checklist. Look for dense urban centers with monumental architecture in stone, evidence of social stratification with a clear ruling class, and the presence of a written language to record laws and history. The Amazonian people checked none of these boxes in the traditional sense, and yet, they achieved something arguably more difficult. They built a civilization of the soil and the canopy. Their monument was not a pyramid of stone, but a continent-spanning garden. Their social complexity was expressed not through palaces and kings, but through the coordinated, multi-generational labor required to sculpt the earth into perfect geometric forms and manage vast food forests. Their record was not written on clay or parchment, but inscribed directly into the living landscape itself, in the patterns of trees and the chemistry of the dirt. This presents a new template for understanding social complexity, one that is decentralized, networked, and ecological. Their power was not centralized in a single capital city, but distributed across a web of interconnected communities linked by rivers and causeways. Their greatest achievement was not dominating their environment, but entering into a sustained, creative partnership with it. This quieter, greener form of civilization forces us to ask a difficult question. Have we, in our search for the familiar markers of power and control, been overlooking other brilliant, sustainable ways of organizing human life? The Amazon is not an outlier. It is a revelation, offering a different path in the human story, one where success is measured not by the height of your towers, but by the health of your forest and the longevity of your soil. Their legacy is a quiet, monumental proof that civilization can wear a different face. This revelation rewrites the very purpose of protecting the Amazon. For decades, the rallying cry for conservation has been to save a pristine wilderness, a last untouched Eden from the ravages of human industry. But if the forest is not a virgin wilderness, but a cultivated garden, a legacy of ancient human care, then that entire framework begins to crumble. Its legendary biodiversity, the very thing we are trying to save, may not exist in spite of human history, but because of it. Those food forests, those enriched soils, those managed landscapes actively created conditions for a greater variety of life to thrive. This means the Amazon we cherish is not a museum piece to be placed under glass, but a living testament to a specific kind of human partnership. This understanding forces a profound shift in strategy. The old model often saw indigenous communities as inhabitants of the forest, sometimes even as a threat to its purity. The new evidence positions them as its essential custodians, the direct inheritors of that old knowledge of how to tend this garden. Their practices of agroforestry, their understanding of plant relationships, their seasonal burning techniques, these are not primitive habits. They are the modern expressions of an ancient, sophisticated science of ecological management. Conservation, therefore, cannot succeed by fencing people out. Its greatest hope lies in partnering with and being led by the communities who hold the living memory of how this landscape works. Their knowledge is not anecdotal, it is empirical, refined over countless generations. This partnership flips a damaging modern narrative on its head. We often view human activity as inherently destructive, a force that only diminishes nature. The Amazonian model presents a powerful counterargument that human activity, when guided by deep, place-based wisdom, can be a generative force. It can enhance biodiversity, build soil fertility, and create resilient ecosystems. The goal is no longer to freeze the jungle in an imaginary, untouched state. Instead, the aim becomes to manage a dynamic, human-influenced system for long-term health and resilience. This is not about going backward, but about blending the best of ancient wisdom with the tools of modern science, using satellite data to complement traditional knowledge, and creating conservation plans that are as culturally informed as they are ecologically sound. The forest itself becomes the ultimate teacher, showing us that the most effective way to protect a place may be to learn how to care for it again, thoughtfully, humbly, and with a sense of continuity that thinks in centuries, not quarterly reports. This leads us to a final, deeply personal question, one that echoes far beyond the river basin. The collapse of that world was not a total erasure. While the great interconnected network of communities vanished, the knowledge they built did not disappear all at once. It fractured, retreated, and found refuge in the most resilient of vessels, human memory and tradition. Today, across the Amazon basin, the living descendants of that lost civilization carry forward echoes of the ancient engineering in their languages, their stories, and their daily hands in the soil. When an elder from the people demonstrates how to create a fertile planting mound by slowly burning vegetation in a pit, mixing in charcoal and organic waste, they are not just gardening. They are performing a ritual that dates back thousands of years, a direct, unbroken line to the creators of Terra. Other groups like the maintain intricate agroforestry systems, carefully selecting and planting dozens of useful tree species together in plots that are clearly human-made forests, not wild jungle. These are not isolated inventions. They are cultural heirlooms, practices preserved through generations that perfectly mirror what archaeologists find in the ancient record. The techniques are so similar, so optimized, that they cannot be coincidence. They are the legacy in practice, a living library of sustainable land management that survived the cataclysm. The echoes are also woven into the stories people tell. Certain myths speak of a time when the world was more crowded, when great beings shaped the earth into the mounds and causeways now hidden by trees. Place names sometimes hold clues, referencing features that no longer exist or describing a landscape of gardens where now only dense forest stands. These oral histories are not literal records, but they are cultural memories, a way of encoding a profound truth about the past into the framework of storytelling. They hint at an ancestral reality where human hands were everywhere, actively tending the world. For archaeologists, these living cultures are not windows into a primitive past, but essential guides to a complex history. By observing how contemporary communities interact with the forest, researchers can better interpret the silent evidence left behind. Understanding why a modern group plants certain trees together helps explain the strange concentrations of species found in ancient soil samples. Learning how they use controlled fire to manage undergrowth provides a model for how the vast anthropogenic forests might have been maintained. The living knowledge helps animate the archaeological bones, turning patterns of pollen and charcoal into a picture of daily life. This reframes our entire view of these indigenous groups. They are not relics frozen in time, living exactly as their ancestors did ago. They are resilient adapters, the custodians of a shattered world's most vital pieces. They endured the unimaginable loss of the Great Dying and carried forward the core principles that allowed their ancestors to thrive, adapting them to new realities. They are the guardians of a philosophy, one that sees humans as active, responsible participants in the ecological community. In their hands, the ancient engineering never truly stopped. It just scaled down, persisted, and waited. This continuity is perhaps the most hopeful finding of all. It means the knowledge system that built the Amazon is not extinct. It is dormant in places, vibrant in others, but it is here. It resides in the minds of farmers who can identify hundreds of medicinal plants, in the rhythms of seasonal burns, and in the communal planting of a forest garden that will feed, yet unborn. This living thread connects the present directly to that pre-contact zenith, offering something priceless, not just a theory about the past, but a tangible toolkit for the future. The question now becomes whether a world that only just learned this story is ready to listen to its teachers. Every great discovery opens a new field of debate. The emerging picture of an engineered Amazon is thrilling, but it is far from a settled story. In fact, this new narrative has sparked some of the most vibrant and essential conversations in modern archaeology. At the heart of these debates are fundamental questions about the scale and nature of this lost world. Take the population estimates, for instance. Some researchers, pointing to the sheer number of earthworks and the extent of dark earth, argue for a pre-contact population in the many millions. Others urge caution, suggesting the evidence could also support a more modest, though still significant, number in the high hundreds of thousands. This isn't just academic quibbling over digits. The number shapes our understanding of their societal complexity, their ecological footprint, and the sheer magnitude of the tragedy that followed contact. Scholars are also re-examining the political landscape. Was this a connected civilization with some form of centralized authority, perhaps regional kingdoms that coordinated those massive earthwork projects? Or was it a looser network of autonomous communities, united by shared practices and trade, but without overarching rulers? The evidence points more toward the latter, a mosaic of cultures rather than a single empire. But the question of how they organized such large-scale labor without kings or emperors is a fascinating puzzle in itself. Then there is the question of their methods. The old image of rampant slash-and-burn agriculture is clearly wrong for their peak. But does that mean fire was never used? The likely answer is more nuanced. They were probably masters of controlled, low-intensity fire, a precise tool for managing undergrowth and renewing soil in their cultivated forests, a world apart from the destructive clearing we associate with the term today. Perhaps the most profound unknown surrounds the role of climate. Some studies suggest that a warmer, wetter period centuries before European contact may have aided the expansion of their agriculture and the flourishing of their societies. Conversely, did shifts in rainfall patterns or prolonged droughts later create stresses that made them more vulnerable? Could climate have been a silent partner in their rise and a subtle factor in their fragility? We simply do not have all the answers yet, and that is the point. These debates are not signs of weakness in the theory, they are the sound of a living science at work. Each new Lidar scan over an unexplored valley, each core sample pulled from deep Terra, each careful excavation of a village site, these acts add another piece to the puzzle. They refine, correct, and sometimes completely reshape our understanding. This lost world was not built in a day, and uncovering its full story will not happen in one either. The history of the Amazon, written in earth and trees, remains a book we are only just learning to read, with many of its most compelling chapters still waiting to be turned. The Amazon's story is not an isolated marvel, but a powerful chapter in a much older global human tradition. Around the world, ancient peoples demonstrated a similar genius for shaping their environments, creating a fascinating web of parallels. In the dense jungles of Central America, the Maya civilization flourished for centuries, not by clearing the forest away, but by weaving their cities into it. They too practiced sophisticated agroforestry, cultivating groves of fruit trees and cacao within their urban centers, creating what scholars call garden cities. Their reservoirs and canal systems managed water with precision, and their raised field agriculture transformed swampy lowlands into fertile plots, echoing the Amazonian approach of working with, not against, the local ecology. Further north, across the vast expanse of North America, many Native American nations were masterful landscape managers long before European contact. They used carefully timed, low-intensity fires as a vital tool. These controlled burns cleared underbrush, encouraged the growth of nutrient-rich grasses for grazing animals, and promoted the health of oak and hickory forests, which provided staple foods. They were not living in a wilderness. They were actively cultivating a productive mosaic of prairie and woodland to support their communities. Across the Pacific, the voyagers who settled the islands of Oceania carried with them a portable ecosystem. They transplanted vital food plants like taro, yam, and breadfruit, creating dense, layered food forests on volcanic slopes and atoll islands. These were not random gardens. They were designed ecosystems that maximized food production in limited space, another testament to the human capacity to engineer living landscapes for sustenance and stability. So what sets the Amazon apart in this global family of ancient gardeners? Two things stand out: scale and secrecy. The transformation in the Amazon was continental. While the Maya shaped city-states and the islanders cultivated individual islands, the Amazonian project unfolded across millions of square kilometers, a coordination of effort that is almost incomprehensible in its breadth. And secondly, The evidence of this work was so seamlessly integrated into the forest that it became invisible. The Maya left stone pyramids rising above the canopy. The North American burns left open landscapes visible for miles, but the Amazon's engineers built in soil and trees, materials that the forest itself could eventually reclaim and camouflage. When the gardeners left, their monuments didn't stand as ruins, they simply grew over, hiding in plain sight until our technology could see through the green veil. This global perspective is crucial. It shows that engineering ecosystems for human benefit is not a modern invention, nor is it an anomaly. It is a recurring, profound theme in human history. From the fire-tended prairies to the terraced hillsides and the cultivated forests, our ancestors everywhere sought to build productive partnerships with their homes. The Amazonian civilization stands as perhaps the most grand and subtle example of this ancient art, a reminder that the most enduring human monuments might not be made of stone, but of living, growing things. The great rivers were the civilization's true arteries. While the earthworks and food forests reveal a mastery of the land, it was the liquid highways of the Amazon and its countless tributaries that stitched this vast world together. These rivers were not obstacles to be crossed. They were the primary roads, bustling with canoe traffic long before the first European ship arrived. Along these flowing routes, the exchange that defined their society moved. A community specializing in a particular type of pottery could trade their wares for medicinal plants cultivated hundreds of miles upstream. Seeds from a prized fruit tree could travel from one riverbank settlement to another, slowly spreading the composition of the anthropogenic forest across the basin. Ideas, stories, and innovations flowed just as freely as the water, creating a shared cultural and technological zone across an area the size of a continent. This connectivity explains the remarkable consistency in practices like creating Terra or constructing geometric earthworks. The knowledge system itself was mobile, carried by the currents. But the rivers provided far more than just transportation. Their banks were the civilization's nurseries and its most dynamic gardens. Every year, the predictable floods would spill over, depositing a fresh layer of mineral-rich silt across the low-lying areas known as. These floodplains were natural gifts of fertility, and the ancient inhabitants did not leave them to chance. Archaeologists find evidence that they enhanced this natural bounty with sophisticated hydraulic engineering. They likely dug networks of canals to manage water flow, creating a kind of aquatic grid that could be carefully controlled. They built raised fields, mounding up soil to create well-drained planting platforms above the wet season waterline. Within these canal networks, they almost certainly practiced forms of aquaculture, creating ponds and weirs to farm fish, providing a reliable, sustainable source of protein right at their doorstep. This transformed the volatile river's edge from a risky place to live into the most productive real estate in the jungle. The annual flood was not a disaster to be feared, but a seasonal rhythm to be harnessed, a natural reset that brought nutrients and renewed the land. This fluvial focus redefines how we must map this lost world. We cannot look only for sites on high ground away from the water. The heart of their settlements, their most intensive agriculture, was likely along these fertile corridors. The river was not just beside their villages, it was woven into their daily life, their economy, and their diet. To understand the scale of this civilization, we must learn to see as they did, to view the map not as a solid green mass, but as a blue branching network, with life and innovation concentrated along every vein and capillary. They did not simply live near the world's greatest river system, they integrated themselves into its very pulse, turning its endless flow into the engine of their society. This mastery of both forest and river created a resilience that lasted for, a stability so profound that its sudden end seems almost unthinkable. Yet, that very interconnectedness may have contained the seeds of a different kind of vulnerability. Their most profound engineering was an act of storytelling. Beyond the practical need for food and shelter, the geometric earthworks and carefully arranged forests served a deeper purpose. They were a language written across the land itself. Each perfect circle or aligned avenue was likely a physical expression of a cosmological idea, a map of the heavens brought down to Earth. The placement of these forms may have mirrored constellations, marked solstice sunrises, or represented creation myths, turning the entire territory into a sacred calendar and a stage for ritual. This transforms our understanding of their labor. Moving thousands of tons of soil to create a vast octagon was not just civic work, it was an act of devotion, a way of aligning human community with the perceived order of the cosmos. The landscape became a permanent, interactive symbol of their worldview. Even their cultivation held symbolic weight. The arrangement of trees in their anthropogenic forests likely followed patterns meaningful to them. Planting certain species together might have represented a mythological pairing or honored a cultural ancestor. A grove of Brazil nut trees could have been more than a food source. It might have been a living memorial, a testament to a founding figure or a sacred event. By shaping the forest's composition, they were weaving their stories and values directly into the living fabric of their world, ensuring that every harvest was also a remembrance. This practice of inscribing meaning onto the environment changes the Amazon from a mere resource base into a profoundly sacred geography. The jungle was not just their home, it was their cathedral, a living house of worship where the walls were made of trees and the floor was sculpted earth. It was their library, with every plant species holding a page of practical knowledge and spiritual significance. And it was their grandest canvas, a space where cultural identity and belief were expressed not in fleeting paint or perishable cloth, but in the enduring forms of hills, canals, and generations of trees. Every modified hillock and intentionally planted grove was a statement, a declaration that they belonged to this land, and it belonged to them in a covenant of mutual care and meaning. This symbolic layer completes the picture of their civilization. They were engineers of ecology, yes, but also philosophers of place. They understood that to build a lasting world, you must build a meaningful one. Their legacy challenges us to see landscapes not just as collections of resources, but as narratives, as archives of human aspiration etched in soil and leaf. What stories, then, are we inscribing upon our own world today? And what will they say about us long after we are gone? The timeline of this garden civilization is written in layers of soil and shadow. Piecing it together is one of archaeology's greatest challenges, because the builders left behind a landscape, not a library with dated entries. To understand when this all happened, scientists have become forensic detectives of the earth itself, reading clues trapped in charcoal and grains of sand. The rich, dark Terra offers some of the clearest signals. Embedded within that engineered soil are countless fragments of charcoal, the remnants of those ancient, controlled burns. Using radiocarbon dating, researchers can analyze this charcoal to determine when the organic material it came from last lived. The results are staggering. They show human activity enriching these soils for 2,500 years or more. This isn't a signature from a single century. It is a long, sustained hum of human presence, a testament to generations who return to the same gardens, nurturing the land across dozens of human lifetimes. Dating the monumental earthworks, however, requires a different kind of clock. These massive shapes are made of moved earth, and dirt itself doesn't contain carbon to date. So how do you determine when a mound was built or a ditch was dug? Scientists turn to a clever technique called optically stimulated luminescence. It works by measuring a natural signal within individual grains of quartz or feldspar in the soil. These tiny minerals store energy from natural background radiation over time, but that stored energy is reset to zero when exposed to sunlight. The moment a shovelful of earth is turned and buried to build an embankment, those grains are sealed in darkness, and their internal clock starts ticking again. By measuring how much energy has reaccumulated, researchers can estimate when that soil was last exposed to the sun, effectively dating the construction event itself. It is a way of asking the dirt, when were you last touched by the light? Other clues come from what was left behind. If excavators find a piece of pottery or a tool within the fill of an earthwork, that artifact can be dated. If they find a hearth or at the base of a mound, the charcoal from that feature provides another anchor point. By combining all these methods, a slow, patient chronology is emerging. The picture is not one of a sudden, explosive revolution. There was no single founding moment when the engineering began. Instead, it reveals a long, patient conversation with the land that ebbed and flowed over. Early practices of soil enrichment and forest management likely began more than 2,000 years ago, growing in sophistication and scale as knowledge accumulated. The peak of this civilization, the era of the most widespread geometric earthworks and the most extensive networks, appears to have been in the centuries just before European ships arrived on the coast. They were not a rising culture cut down in its infancy. They were a mature, flourishing society at the height of its powers when the distant accident of contact occurred. This long arc makes their achievement even more profound. It was not a fleeting experiment, but a sustained, multi-generational project to cultivate a world. Their timeline challenges our own hurried sense of history, reminding us that some of humanity's most enduring works are not built in years, but in centuries. The obsession with El Dorado was a failure of imagination. For generations, European explorers plunged into the green heart of the Amazon, driven by stories of a king who coated himself in gold dust and a city where precious metal was as common as stone. They sought a treasure they could carry away in chests, a wealth that could be melted down and stamped into coins. In their frantic, often brutal search for this glittering mirage, they walked right over the true treasure, and in doing so, they missed the entire point of the civilization they encountered. The real El Dorado was not a city of gold. It was a civilization of black earth. The true, immeasurable wealth of the Amazon was not locked in vaults or mined from rock. It was grown. It was the profound, self-renewing fertility of the Terra, the engineered soil that turned the jungle into a perennial garden. It was the staggering biodiversity of the food forests, offering nuts, fruits, medicines, and materials in a sustainable, endless harvest. It was the prosperity that came from a deep understanding of ecological balance, a wealth measured in full bellies, healthy communities, and a landscape that grew richer with careful human care. The conquistadors and adventurers were looking for a quick fortune, a prize to be looted. What they found, and tragically failed to recognize, was a slow, steady, and magnificent fortune built over. This was a golden age, but of a kind their worldview could not comprehend. It was an age of green and black gold, of living abundance rooted in the earth itself. While they dug for veins of metal, they trampled the very systems that created a different kind of richness, one that sustained millions. Their quest was a tragic irony. In searching for a legendary city of wealth, they helped destroy a very real civilization whose entire philosophy was about generating and preserving wealth for the long term. The Gilded King of the El Dorado myth was a fantasy. The true sovereigns of the Amazon were the generations of gardeners who knew that the greatest treasure is a fertile field, a healthy forest, and the knowledge to keep them both thriving forever. That was the priceless inheritance they built, and that was what vanished when the search for a simpler, shinier treasure brought the old world crashing in. The evidence of this ancient garden is now disappearing beneath modern plows. The very activities that threaten the living Amazon today, the clearing of land for cattle pastures and vast soybean fields, are also erasing the last physical traces of the civilization that once cultivated it. This is a loss that operates on two devastating levels. On the surface, it is the loss of forest, a tragedy we can see from space. But beneath that green canopy lies a second, invisible loss, the obliteration of the archaeological record itself. A bulldozer leveling a patch of jungle does not just knock down trees, it scrapes away the subtle, old signature of human history etched into the earth. Those geometric earthworks, visible only from the air or through careful ground survey, are flattened in hours. The rich, dark Terra soils, which took centuries to create, are scattered and mixed beyond recognition. Ancient pottery fragments that could tell us about trade networks are crushed to dust. It is a process of double erasure, first of the ecosystem, and then of the memory of the people who knew how to sustain it. This creates a painful historical irony. Our contemporary drive for short-term agricultural gain is systematically destroying the evidence of societies that achieved long-term abundance through a completely different model. We are, in a very real sense, burning the library to plant a single crop. Beyond large-scale deforestation, other quieter threats loom. Looters, searching for artifacts to sell on the black market, dig into ancient mounds and village sites, tearing objects from their context and making it impossible for archaeologists to understand their true story. Unregulated road construction and urban expansion carve through landscapes without any archaeological assessment, severing the ancient connections between sites that were once linked by causeways and managed forests. This reality has turned modern archaeology in the Amazon into a race against time. Researchers are no longer working with the luxury of decades to slowly map and excavate a site. They are often in a desperate sprint, using Lidar to scan regions ahead of the advancing frontier of clearance, then rushing to ground truth the most promising features before the chainsaws arrive. Every earthwork documented, every soil sample collected, every GPS point logged is a piece of the puzzle rescued from permanent oblivion. This work is not just about academic curiosity, it is an urgent act of preservation. It is about learning the rules of this ancient, sustainable game before the last playing board is broken up for firewood. The knowledge locked in those soils and patterns is a non-renewable resource. Once it is gone, we cannot get it back. The story of this lost civilization, a story that fundamentally reshapes our understanding of human potential and our relationship with nature, risks being silenced just as we are learning how to listen. Their legacy is a blueprint for a different kind of future. While we grapple with the immense challenges of soil depletion, climate change, and biodiversity loss, the ancient Amazonians left behind a proven model, one that operated on principles modern science is only now urgently trying to replicate. They achieved something we struggle with. They created a system that grew more fertile and more diverse the longer they tended it. Their core innovation was simple yet profound. They saw waste as a resource. The charcoal from their fires, broken pottery, food scraps, and fish bones were not trash to be discarded. They were ingredients for building the foundation of their future. By turning this organic matter into Terra, they transformed potential pollution into permanent fertility, locking carbon into the ground for centuries instead of releasing it into the atmosphere. This ancient practice of biochar is now at the forefront of cutting-edge climate research. Scientists are exploring how modern versions of this technique could pull carbon dioxide from the air, sequester it in agricultural soils, and simultaneously boost crop yields, addressing two global crises at once. The Amazonians were, in effect, master carbon farmers thousands of years before the term was invented. Their agroforestry systems offer another powerful lesson. They did not farm in monocultures, those vast fields of a single crop that dominate our modern landscape and are vulnerable to pests and disease. Instead, they cultivated diversity itself, designing gardens that mimicked the natural forest structure. This approach created resilience. If one species had a poor year, others would thrive, ensuring food security. The layered canopy protected the soil from erosion, conserved water, and provided habitat for countless other species, from pollinators to birds. This is not a romantic notion of primitive living. It is a highly sophisticated form of ecological engineering that maximized production while nurturing the entire web of life. Their entire civilization stands as a living contradiction to a persistent modern myth, the idea that supporting a large human population necessarily requires sacrificing environmental health. The evidence suggests the opposite was true in the Amazon. Their highest population levels coincided with the peak of their landscape engineering, the period of greatest soil enrichment and most extensive food forests. They flourished not by conquering nature, but by becoming a keystone species within it, one whose activities actively enhanced the ecosystem's productivity for all. The key was working within ecological limits and thinking in that span generations, not just harvest seasons. They invested in the land with the understanding that the returns would benefit theirs. This long-now perspective is perhaps their most challenging lesson for our short-term world. In an age defined by a climate crisis, their wisdom, encoded in the very soil and trees they left behind, shouts across the centuries. It tells us that sustainability is not about doing less harm, but about active, intelligent stewardship that creates more life. It suggests that our goal should not be to minimize our footprint, but to leave a footprint that enriches the ground for those who follow. The question is no longer whether their model worked. The black earth and the living forest are the proof. The urgent question is whether we, facing our own ecological crossroads, are wise enough to learn from gardeners who thought in centuries. The map of this lost world is still being drawn, and most of it remains blank. For every geometric earthwork revealed by Lidar, there are thousands of square miles of untouched canopy waiting for their first scan. The Amazon basin is so vast that the areas surveyed so far represent mere pinpricks of light in a sea of green shadow. This means the greatest discoveries likely lie ahead of us, not behind. Each new flight carrying that laser mapping technology has the potential to unveil patterns we cannot yet conceive, perhaps earthworks of even greater scale and complexity, or road networks so extensive they redefine our understanding of connectivity across the continent. The exploration is shifting from a search for single sites to a revelation of entire landscapes, waiting to be read like a forgotten language written in soil and contour. But the future of discovery will not look only to the sky. It will also peer into the mud of ancient riverbeds and the very cells of the forest. As rivers shift their courses over centuries, they bury the traces of past human activity under layers of silt. Underwater archaeology in these old channels could recover tools, ceramics, and even preserved plant remains from eras now submerged, offering a time capsule of daily life. Meanwhile, geneticists are beginning a different kind of excavation. By analyzing the DNA of trees across the Amazon, they can trace family lines. If a particular grove of Brazil nut trees shows a genetic signature indicating it was planted from a single source centuries ago, that is a molecular fingerprint of human cultivation. Mapping these genetic patterns could eventually show us the precise boundaries of ancient orchards and how far the hand of the gardener truly reached. The ultimate goal is no longer just to find more things, but to understand the connections between all things. How did the creation of a Terra garden influence the layout of a nearby ceremonial earthwork? How did a settlement's position on the river network determine which tree species they cultivated? Future research promises to weave together the threads of soil science, botany, archaeology, and hydrology into a single, coherent picture. We will move from cataloging artifacts to modeling an entire civilization as a dynamic, living system. This integrated understanding will show us not just what they built, but how they thought, how they saw their place within the web of life they so carefully tended. Given the pace of recent revelations, the next decade may well force us to rewrite this story once more. What we accept as fact today might be just a preliminary sketch of a much grander portrait. With every new scan and every new soil core, we are not simply adding details to a settled history. We are participating in the real-time recovery of a world we never knew existed. The greatest wonder may be that the most profound chapters of this ancient narrative are still waiting, patiently, for their turn to be read. This new history cannot be written from the outside looking in. Uncovering the story of the Amazon's engineered past is not a neutral act of science. It is a deeply human endeavor that must be approached with care, respect, and partnership. The true stakeholders in this unfolding narrative are the indigenous communities who call the Amazon home today. For them, these discoveries are not ancient history, they are family history. Ethical engagement means shifting the entire framework of research. It moves away from the old model where outsiders arrive, extract artifacts and data, and leave publishing papers that the local people may never even see. The new model is one of collaboration. It means sitting down with community elders and leaders from the very beginning, explaining the goals of a survey or excavation, and genuinely listening to their perspectives, their concerns, and their own oral histories. It involves hiring and training community members as part of the research team, ensuring that skills and knowledge are shared. Most importantly, it requires respecting sacred sites. A geometric earthwork is not just an archaeological feature to be mapped and dug. It may be a place of profound spiritual significance, a resting place of ancestors, or a location tied to creation stories. An ethical approach honors that meaning, sometimes choosing to document a site without ever disturbing the soil, using technology like Lidar to learn without intrusion. The ultimate goal is to ensure the discoveries benefit the communities themselves. This can take many forms, from supporting educational programs that teach both traditional knowledge and archaeological findings, to helping create cultural centers where this shared history can be celebrated. For indigenous groups, this validated history is more than academic. It is a tool of immense power. When a government or corporation claims their ancestral lands are empty, undeveloped wilderness open for clearance, they can now point to the scientific evidence. They can show maps of ancient earthworks beneath the trees, soil studies proving of cultivation, and botanical surveys revealing the hand of their ancestors in the forest's very composition. This history validates their deep, unbroken connection to the land. It proves their stewardship is not a recent adaptation, but the continuation of a legacy thousands of years old, a legacy of the most sophisticated environmental management the Amazon has ever known. In a world that often dismisses indigenous knowledge as primitive, this archaeology provides a powerful counter-narrative, one written in the language of Western science itself. It affirms that their ways of life, their agroforestry practices, their understanding of the ecosystem, are the direct descendants of a brilliant civilization. This isn't just about reclaiming the past, it's about securing the future. By anchoring their cultural identity and land rights in this deep history, communities gain a stronger voice in the critical conversations that will determine the fate of the Amazon itself. The story of the lost gardeners, therefore, is not a closed book. It is a living dialogue, and its most important chapters are being written today in partnership with the inheritors of that ancient green wisdom. The jungle itself is a living parchment, written and rewritten over time. To truly grasp the scale of this discovery, we must learn to see the Amazon not as a wilderness, but as a palimpsest. That is a special kind of ancient manuscript, where scribes would carefully scrape away the original text from a piece of parchment, usually made of animal skin, and write something new over the top. But the old writing was never completely erased. Over centuries, with the right angle of light or a careful eye, those first words would begin to show through again, a ghostly layer of history beneath the surface. This is the perfect metaphor for the engineered Amazon. The vibrant, teeming rainforest we see today is the top layer, the new and dominant text. It is a breathtaking story of nature's resilience and power. But if we know how to look, we can begin to perceive the fainter script beneath. It is etched into the very fabric of the place. Those gentle, almost imperceptible mounds that form perfect circles when viewed from above, they are a sentence in the old language. The startlingly dark, fertile soil amidst miles of thin red earth, that is a bolded paragraph. The unnatural clusters of Brazil nut trees standing sentinel in the forest, they are a recurring signature, a flourish left by the original authors. This ecological palimpsest is the most profound evidence of all, because it is not a single artifact to be dug up, it is the entire landscape confessing its history. reading it requires a shift in perception. A botanist walking through the forest is no longer just cataloging species, they are deciphering a planting list. An ecologist studying soil samples is not just measuring nutrients, they are interpreting a recipe for sustenance. An archaeologist with a Lidar map is not just finding shapes, they are translating geometry into ceremony and community. The thrill of this field comes from those moments of clarity, when the modern jungle seems to momentarily dissolve, and the older, cultivated world shimmers into view. You might stand in a grove of fruit trees and suddenly understand you are in the aisle of an ancient orchard. You might see a straight causeway, now just a subtle ridge underfoot, and visualize it as a bustling path connecting neighbors. The two layers, the wild and the cultivated, exist in a permanent, beautiful dialogue. This changes the meaning of conservation entirely. We are not trying to preserve a pristine page. We are working to protect a layered masterpiece, ensuring that the faint, brilliant writing of the past continues to be legible within the vigorous, living text of the present. To lose the top layer is a tragedy for our planet. But to lose our ability to read the layer beneath would be to forget a fundamental human truth, that we are not separate from nature, but its most attentive, and sometimes its most creative, scribes. The story of the Amazon's lost gardeners is not just about the past, it is a mirror held up to our own worldview. To truly engage with this discovery is to undergo a quiet but profound personal reckoning. For centuries, Western thought has been built upon a powerful and persistent dichotomy, a belief that nature and civilization exist in separate, often opposing realms. On one side, we place the wild, untamed, and pure. On the other, we place the human, the built, and the controlled. This story shatters that divide. It proves that the most iconic symbol of untouched nature on our planet is, in fact, one of humanity's oldest and grandest creations. Nature and culture, the wild and the cultivated, were never truly separate. They have always been intertwined in a deep, reciprocal dance, and the Amazon is the most eloquent proof we have ever found. This realization carries a necessary dose of humility. It forces us to confront the biases embedded in our own language and assumptions. For generations, societies like the one that engineered the Amazon were labeled primitive or simple, living in a state of nature rather than shaping it. We now see that judgment says more about our own limited perspective than it does about their reality. They were not lacking sophistication, they simply expressed it in a different language, one written in soil composition and forest genetics rather than stone monuments and written records. Their science of ecology, their engineering of entire watersheds, their long-term botanical experiments, these were fields of knowledge so advanced we are only now, with satellites and DNA sequencers, beginning to decode their full complexity. To call them primitive is to profoundly misunderstand what civilization can be. Yet, within that humility lies a powerful and urgent source of hope. In an era often defined by humanity's destructive footprint, the Amazonian model stands as a monumental counterexample. It demonstrates our species' inherent capacity for a different kind of interaction with the planet, one that is not extractive but regenerative. They did not just take from the land, they gave back to it, actively enriching its soils and amplifying its biodiversity. Their success was measured not in the wealth they accumulated, but in the health they cultivated. This changes the entire narrative of human possibility. It shows that a thriving, complex society is not only compatible with a thriving ecosystem, but can be the very engine that drives it. Their legacy is a quiet, old proof of concept for a sustainable future. So the next time you see a satellite image of the Amazon, that vast, unbroken sea of green, try to see it with new eyes. You are not looking at a pristine wilderness waiting to be preserved or exploited. You are looking at a living museum, its exhibits written in the patterns of trees and the chemistry of the earth. You are looking at a testament to human ingenuity, a monument built not to the glory of kings, but to the patience and wisdom of generations of gardeners. And most importantly, you are looking at a silent guide. the answers to some of our most pressing modern questions about sustainable agriculture, carbon sequestration, and living within ecological limits are not just technologies we need to invent. They are practices we need to remember, etched into the very land we are now struggling to protect. The jungle holds a conversation that began thousands of years ago, and it is waiting for us to join it again. Their story now becomes our own. The rediscovery of this ancient garden civilization is not a closed chapter to be admired from a distance. It is an unfolding narrative in which we have all been cast as characters. We are the generation that finally learned to read the writing in the soil and see the shapes beneath the trees. With that revelation comes a profound and immediate responsibility, a call to witness and to protect. This is no longer just about archaeology, it is about stewardship. The evidence is clear: the Amazon is not a warehouse of raw materials. It is a living library, the grandest historical archive on Earth, and its pages are being burned. Our role is to become its guardians. We can choose to support the scientific missions racing against deforestation to map and understand this legacy before it vanishes. We can advocate for policies that protect both the forest and the rights of the indigenous communities who are its rightful custodians, the living bearers of this ancient knowledge. And perhaps most personally, we can let this story reshape our own relationship with the natural world. The lesson of the Black Earth is that human activity can enrich rather than deplete. We can incorporate that wisdom into our own lives, from supporting regenerative agriculture to rethinking what we consider waste. By understanding that the greatest jungle was a garden, we begin to see all of nature differently, not as a separate realm to be either conquered or walled off, but as a partner in a shared future. This heritage belongs to all of humanity, a testament to what is possible when we think in generations. The lost civilization speaks across the centuries, not with a voice of warning, but with a quiet, proven blueprint for balance. They are urging us to remember what they never forgot, that our survival is woven from the same threads as the forest's vitality. The choice before us is stark. Will we be the generation that finally listened, or the one that let the last echo of their wisdom fade into the final silence? The surface of history is a story we tell ourselves, and sometimes we get it profoundly wrong. We began with a myth of untouched wilderness and arrived at the truth of a cultivated continent, a legacy written not in stone, but in soil and leaf. The dark earth, the perfect earthworks, the orchards hidden in plain sight, these are not just clues to a lost world, they are a new lens for seeing our own. This narrative does more than rewrite a chapter in a textbook, it reshapes our very sense of the possible. It asks us to reconsider what civilization looks like and what it means to thrive within an ecosystem rather than apart from it. As the writer Charles observed, the Amazon is not what it seems. Beneath its green veil lies a testament to human ingenuity that challenges our deepest assumptions about progress and wilderness. Let that revelation be more than a fascinating tale. Let it be a catalyst. If societies with simple tools could partner with a rainforest to build a lasting, abundant world, what does that say about our own potential? With all our knowledge and technology, what kind of world could we choose to cultivate? The choices we make now will become the layers future generations read in the land. We would love to hear what this story makes you think about. Share your reflections in the comments below. If you want to join us as we uncover more of history's hidden layers, subscribe and stay curious. Our journey into the mysteries of the past and their lessons for our future continues together.